there I am. Hello, hello.
Yes.
So thanks you guys all for coming out on this beautiful sunny Saturday. It's nice to see you. And I have, some fun stuff for you. So I have a question for you. Who of you has seen the Gilmore Girls? I've got 3, 4, who won't admit it. Of those who have seen the show, who remembers who Shane was? No. Actually, no. Shane was a brief character on the show, and she was the girl from the wrong side of town. She was the girl who, God forbid, worked after school. She was not a virgin. And she dyed her hair. So essentially, Shane was the whore. Doing some whorish behavior over here. So she was the whore, and her basic purpose as a character on the entire show is to act as a shill for the love triangle between good girl and bad boy. As soon as she had served that purpose, she was dismissed from the entire series. And she was left with this phrase: when good girl asked bad boy about her, he said, and I quote, "I had no feelings for her. In fact, I don't even know her last name." She is the girl that few desire to be, few aspire to be, even when that's what we are. So whore, you say that, and it has a lot of interesting definitions, but most people think prostitute or sex worker in the new parlance. That's not untrue. That is true. However, whore is a word that has many, many, many meanings, and encompasses many, many different things. So you say the word whore in public, and you might hear, oh, that's a streetwalker or a crackhead or that drunk girl party who flirts with everyone. Think a little bit more, and you might go back to the slut in high school, or that chick who borrowed your favorite dress and never returned it. That's all a little old school. And recently, it's sort of come into a sort of new revision. It's become popular. Again, it's been reclaimed, and not just by the gay community. There's a corporate whore, a dork whore, a machoue whore, right? So implying that basically anything done in the purpose of exploitation is somehow whorish. Anything excessively consumed provides delicious hue of shame. However, the actual root of the word, Proto-Germanic, if you want to know it, is choras, actually means one who desires. And as most of you know, desire has driven civilization. And those women who have acted out of a space of desire and pursued often have been called whores, regardless of any sexual influence. In fact, women have been called whores throughout history for daring to get an education, give medical care to the underprivileged, lead an army, or simply go out in public in a very dashing tuxedo. Or they are just the people who have been considered to be the ones who just go too far. Yes. They are the ones, those wickedly mercurial individuals who refuse, as Thoreau so aptly described, they refuse to live lives of quiet desperation. Because it's an interesting thing. We all are subject to societal expectations. And they're myriad, and they're many, and they can be very, very hardcore. And they continue to grow. Now, I'm sure that there is someone in this room who has managed to succeed at life, love, career, family, while all maintaining your humility, your virtue, and your grace. If you exist, I applaud you. However, the rest of us have been a bit messier. We pop pills, we fall for inappropriate partners, we lie, we stay up too late, we sleep in too late, we bitch, we piss off our families, we struggle with depression, apathy, guilt, and madness. We go out without makeup on, or sometimes we go out without too much on, or we go out with too much on. That's certainly true for me on occasion. We forget to be empowered, and sometimes we care too deeply about what other people think of us. But along that bumpy road, we occasionally give and receive love, experience transcendence, feel joy, and every once in a while, we change the world. So I want to talk about in changing the world. One of my favorite whores, Victoria Woodhull, who was amazing. Victoria Woodhull was an advocate for free love. She was a spiritualist. She consorted with madams and abortionists. She also fought for women to have the right to vote. And early on in her career, she was very, very, very actively embraced by those two great women who started up the wonderful suffrage movement and, the women's movement, sort of as we know it, though it's, come from many other different sources. Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Then, we can on. She was, however, kicked out by them pretty quickly, because Victoria Woodhull was very scandalous, and I also have to mention she was pretty enough sexy too. She used to wear a white flower in her throat, and when she would speak, she was so impassioned and so full of glory and fury. So she was kicked out and condemned and quite scandalous, largely for her free love stands, but for other things. However, she did manage to achieve quite a few considerable firsts. Her and her sister started up the first female-run New York stock brokerage firm. They also started up Woodhull and Claflin Weekly. I know that's a little mouthful right there. That was a newspaper that, along with supporting contraceptive rights for women, the wearing of bloomers, was also the first paper in the United States to publish the Communist Manifesto in full. And she also ran for president. Twice. She didn't win. And part of the reason that she didn't win was because she was scandalous, and she was wild, and because she was also arrested on obscenity charges, because she dared to send contraceptive information through the United States Postal Service. That was the technical reason, but largely the reason when she was condemned and jailed and part of a sort of larger political issue is because she made the very, very, very bold choice to do something that we all sort of recently experienced in a different setting, government records, which is that she outed Henry Ward Beecher. And he was a very respected figure of the time. He was a preacher. He was also having affairs with a number of his constituents. He was also having an affair with his business partner's wife. And Victoria Woodhull declared, and said, "I do not want to live in a world of hypocrisy, so I'm going to expose you." And she did. That earned her a great amount of condemnation. He was defended. These days, there's a statue of Henry Ward Beecher in the park in New York. There is none of Victoria Woodhull. Because she was, well, a little inconsistent. She was a little messy. She was a little flawed. And she didn't spend the rest of her days fighting for suffrage and being a tireless fighter for rights. No, a couple of years later, she recanted everything that she had once believed and died fat and happy and rich due to marriage and a small village in England. She was possibly a woman ahead of her time. She was also deeply flawed. So, and I admire her for this. I also admire Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, and of course, our favorite Eleanor Roosevelt. There's one no greater icon, I think, for many of feminism there. And she's amazing, and I admire them. I sincerely do. I sincerely do. But in reading their stories and reading about them, I didn't relate to their experiences. I didn't feel myself in them. I didn't feel that sort of deep human connection of inspiration and admiration. And there are many reasons for this, but one of the most significant reasons is that all three of those women mentioned all came from the upper class. They had an upper class education, they had upper class opportunities. And the truth is that women, largely women, men too, people, but women who come from these areas of the world are not the ones who are called whores. At least, well, some of them do better ex-husbands, but that's the thing. So it is, this is a fact, this is a class issue. And Victoria Woodhull, part of the problem she was condemned, is she was most decidedly not from the upper classes. In fact, she was born to very messy, very dysfunctional, totally insane, con artist parents. Her father sexually and physically abused her. She was forced to work as a medium at 6 years old on the carnival circuit. She married at 16 a much older man who was a morphine addict, and her second child was born with developmental difficulties in a hovel on the south side of Chicago. And this was all before she was 21 years old. And so this is a woman of intelligence, of a certain attractiveness, who goes in that world and wants to believe in things and wants to make things happen. And she's not given very much recourse for this. And this is a very significant issue, as I said, because who can tell me who this is? Coco Chanel. How many of you have worn her perfume? Anyone? She's still highly respected. Oh yeah, you do? No, you do? Excellent. No, she's still a symbol of elegance and respectability and modernity. Coco Chanel was also a drug addict. She was a mistress. She had a number of affairs with married men. She was homophobic, and she was a Nazi sympathizer, and possibly an agent. But no one ever called her old. Well, not publicly. In 1958, a prostitute wrote to the London Times because she was very, very upset with this new movement of philanthropy. All these people who would go into the slums and attempt to save the poor, unfortunate, fallen sisters. It was a very legitimate movement, and she decided and absolutely refused to be a victim. She wrote a long letter. It's a brilliant letter, and I'm going to read just a little bit from it for you. She wrote, "I was a fine, robust, healthy girl, 13 years of age. I had larked with boys of my own age. I had huddled with them, boys and girls together, all night long in our common haunts. I had seen much and heard abundantly of the mystery of the sexes. To me, such things had been a matter of common sight and common talk. For some time, I had coquetted on the verge of a strong curiosity and a natural desire, and without a particle of affection, scarce a partiality. I lost what? Not my virtue, for I never had any. That which is commonly, but untruly called virtue, I gave away. You, Reverend Mr. Philanthropist, what call you virtue? Is it not the principle, the essence, which keeps watch and ward over the conduct, the substance, the materiality? No such principle ever kept watch and ward over me. And I repeat, I never lost that which I did not have. We come from the dregs of society. And what business has society to have dregs? Such dregs as we. You, the pious, the moral, the respectable, who stared on your smooth and pleasant side of the great gulf you have dug and keep between yourself and the dregs, why don't you bridge it over or fill it up, and by some urban or generous process, absorb us into your leaven mass until we become interpenetrated with goodness? What have we to be ashamed of, we who do not know what shame is, the shame that you mean? So there's some debate as to whether or not it was actually written by a prostitute or by a woman for that matter. I like to believe that it was, because there's a passion in it that I recognize and I feel, because I am one of these women. I am no sex worker. I know a lot of sex workers. I've marched for sex workers' rights. It's something I very profoundly believe in. I've never personally been a sex worker. However, I do know the depth of the way that women who are a little too wild to develop, reflecting the ills of the society, struggling on the margins. I know well how we're treated, and I know well how we're viewed, because I lived there, and I grew up there. So, a funny little story about this is, and I'm sure that some of you can relate to this. So, a few years back, I was invited by a very good friend of mine to attend with him as his companion an entrepreneurial charity dinner. Yes. Working as a bartender, as I did at that time, I was somewhat deficient in what I imagined one would wear to such things, so I put on my best dress. It was crepe, I curled my hair. I wore my best shoes, which happened to be open-toed. I thought I looked, yes, I will blend in. I will look like I belong. I expected there to be trophy wives. I walk into this room, and when I suddenly discover, much to my dismay, that every single woman there was wearing a pantsuit. And most of them are made out of tweed. So instantly, because of this, simply and purely because of the age of my friend, companion, an older Indian man of success, and because of my outfit, instantly the entire room was absolutely convinced that I was his whore. It did not matter that we talked about Derrida. It did not matter that we had long conversations about the divine revelation of Christ and what that means for the common humanity. That's his passion, not mine, but it's a fascinating subject. It didn't matter. Men were afraid to talk to me, and one wife actually spit in my face. Yes. But you know, this is okay. It was dismaying because I had forgotten. I had forgotten that I will never go quite in that way. But as time has gone on, what I know is that I'm needed. I have a vital role to play in society and in culture, as do all of those who are like myself, whether they be novel writing, mothers of three dominatrixes, or simply those who struggle to fit into a very specific idea of what is respectable. We have a role to play, and we're important, because we live on the margins and we live on the outside of it. And we are unfettered, on some level, by respectability. So in my life, I've had a lot of interesting experiences with this. I have not, despite many people who tried to convince me to be the other woman. I haven't. However, I have received, received many the confession, secret sexual confession of a married woman. Now, despite what you might think, these are not expressed to me in an act of titillation. They're not wanting to tell me about their secret fetish so they can kind of get off on it. They are genuinely expressing something that they're worried about, or an inadequacy or a fantasy that they don't feel comfortable about sharing with their partner.